Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the sanctimoniously notorious RMB, here for what is, believe it or not, Robservations live chat number 189. A special thanks go out to all of you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, all of you imagination connoisseurs. I couldn't do it without you or this great little community that we have built. Or Gilbert. I couldn't have done it with Gilbert either. Gilbert is here. I think Gilbert might want a cookie. He waited. It was smart of Gilbert. Okay, Gilbert, you want a cookie? You got to come up and be on the show. Let's make Gilbert come up and be on the show. Come on. Come up. Okay, he's got Tallulah, so one for Gilbert. There you go, buddy. And Tallulah, you too. There's Tallulah. Wait. There you go, Tallulah. So Gilbert and Tallulah, the doodle heads, the dynamic doodles. Okay, can you have one more? That's it. Anyway, so welcome to the show. I want to thank you all for being here. As we all know, let me pay full attention to this. As we all know, Robservations is brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com, getluckytiger.com, and when you check out and you buy any of their great products, you will get 20% off your order by punching in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity. And I think that's pretty cool. Once again, I really like their facial scrub and their all-over body wash. It is delightful. So check out Lucky Tiger. Also, I do little videos living the Lucky Tiger life, and I dropped another one with James Hills, and he was in Florida. So you can check that out on the Robservations. Well, it's a Robservations Presents on the Burnettwork. There's 3 videos, including the video I did with Alan Murphy, the president of Lucky Tiger. So check that out. Anyway, I'm going to say right now, I think this chat is going to be a little political, overtly political. It's going to touch on some little political, divisive subject matter. Not that we don't always talk divisive subject matter on the show, because we do, but usually it's not as divisive. It's fun divisive, not acrimoniously divisive. This might get to be a little acrimonious, and I'm just gonna start. I'm gonna jump right into it. I got a letter, and it's on the Burnettwork website, and I wanted to read. I didn't read it, but it's posted. You can go to the Burnettwork.net website and read this letter, and I would encourage you all to post. And I'd like to know what you think, or you can comment in the comment section of this chat. So I'm just going to jump in, and then I have another follow-up article that I would like to touch on that's quite long, but I won't read that whole thing. But anyway, this letter goes. This comes from Jeffrey Mao. Hi, Rob. Your recent discussion on the nature of good, heroic, well-written female characters brought up a side issue regarding misogyny and sexism from predominantly male geeks. You mentioned that it was partly due with them not being the greatest Lotharios, and while you didn't elaborate further on that, as you didn't have a lot of time, I felt a further examination on the subject would be interesting, and I'm going to use myself to provide some examples. This subject may be a bit controversial, so you can decide whether you want to read it online or not, as I feel like it brings up a lot of the dark side of geekdom. Oh, yes, Mr. Mao, I figured I'm going to jump into this one. I'd like to preface this by saying that I don't know how geekdom is like now for kids who are getting into it like you or I did back in the 70s or the 80s. But when we were kids, I'm certain that being a geek, being a nerd who was into the usual geeky, nerdy things that kids were into, was probably viewed as not being very useful application of one's time and energy. I probably, like most kids, got into everything I was into between the ages of 8 and 10, maybe a year or two later or earlier, but that range is about right. So I'm a kid and I'm cruising along, having a great old time, enjoying all this stuff. And in a few years, bam, puberty hits. And boy, does that mess me up. I'm goofy looking, wearing glasses, braces, not an athletic bone in my body. No girl is going to get near me. Not that I was really trying to, but hell, biology is knocking, and I got to answer the door. So I make various lame attempts at chatting up girls, dancing with them, and of course, never getting anywhere. Add in the general issue of being a Chinese kid in a world of mostly white kids, and all that adds to an awkwardness and the rejection and the feeling of being an outsider. So, what do? Escape into the worlds of Star Trek, Star Wars, reading sci-fi books, nonfiction books, all that stuff. I was an only child, so that made things only worse. Using my own experiences, I can definitely see where misogyny starts. Girls don't like you. They reject you. They don't want to go out with you. It's no wonder you hate them. They're the enemy. God forbid if one of them takes interest in your geeky world, you and your friends have a little club, maybe a couple. You get together every day to play D&D after school. Hell, why do you think clubs are mostly formed by men and the membership is men only? Males and females are biologically programmed to stay away from each other during the prepubescent years for fear that they might, do it too early. There's a reason why boys think girls are icky and have cooties. You're supposed to grow out of it, but some don't. It might take longer or never, as we see with the incels. What is it? Involuntary celibate. I was an incel for longer than I care to remember. My theory is that for boys, at least, when they reach puberty, not only is it a sexual maturation, but a physical one as well. There are a percentage who take up sports seriously. There are also a percentage who become sexually active. There's another percentage who are geeky, nerdy, bookish, to use an older fashioned term. But, I love the term bookish, by the way. Rarely, if ever, is anyone in both the nerdy, geeky percentage and the other one. I don't know why that is. I think there's only so much that a boy can devote mentally, physically, and emotionally to his pursuits and interests. You might have been a pretty geeky kid, but you were blessed with athletic ability or good looks or a combination of the two, and maybe you found yourself lucky with the ladies, and you just ran out of time to continue your geeky interests. Being a geek takes up a lot of your free time, presuming you are spending sufficient time on your studies. And if you're out playing sports or chasing tail, well, something's got to give. I don't quite know how to end this letter, as it's less a letter than giving my thoughts on the matter. So you're more than welcome to add discussion if you do read this online. Thanks for reading, and see you on the next Robservations. Jeffrey Mao. Well, Jeffrey, thank you for that. I thought this was an interesting subject to cover, because I get a lot of email and a lot of direct messages and a lot of Facebook messages from a lot of different guys that ask me questions about girls. I guess I should find that flattering, but I do get a lot of those kinds of questions. And I have my whole life. And they're usually from, I would say, geeky guys. And I consider myself a geeky guy. I mean, I was very much interested in my geeky interests since I was a little kid, as I've told you. And I was really into it. I was really into my Star Trek interests, comics, model spaceships, all of that. But I was also in the closet about it to a certain extent, because I didn't have any other friends who were into it, like really into it. And I just assumed that since there weren't very many, like I had no other friends that watched Star Trek, I was the only one. So it was kind of my thing. But what was really interesting to me was that because I identified so strongly with Captain Kirk, I wanted to be like my favorite fictional character. I mean, it was Kirk, of course, then it was James Bond, and there was lots of beautiful women that went along with both Star Trek and the James Bond franchise. So I was interested in the ladies from a very early age. And it was apparent to me watching these things, like, well, if you wanted to meet girls, you had to be more like James Bond or Captain Kirk. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean a swashbuckling hero who's good with guns or phasers, but it was more of an approach. You had to have, I guess, a certain swagger, a certain self-confidence. Basically, you had to be able to walk into a room and talk to people. Now, I wanted to talk to girls, but talk to people. I like people too. I liked anybody, guys, girls, people that were young, people that were old. But the thing that geek culture, even though I didn't know it at the time, was instilling in me was, and I thought this would be true of anybody who watches science fiction, fantasy, and horror, was a certain sense of being interested in the world outside, the world around me. Like, I loved my flights of fancy. Don't get me wrong. I loved getting a package from the Science Fiction Book Club and getting a book or two, or in the introductory package, I think it was 5 books, and looking forward to spending weekends curled up with these books. But all of these things that I loved were all about human behavior. So for me, it was all about like informing the way you lived your life. Like, you need to be able to walk into any room. In Kirk's case, you need to be able to go anywhere around the galaxy, no matter where you are. Now, hopefully, you will have your 2 best friends as your wingmen at your side. But, you know, the Enterprise crew is going to solve problems or explore strange new worlds. But you needed to be able to beam down into any situation and make it work out. Talk to people you didn't know, go places you'd never been. And in my mind, I was like, well, I can do that. Like, I can go places I've never been and meet people that I've never met. And it was a skill. It's a learnable skill. You can learn how to talk to people. You can learn how to listen to people. You can learn how to assess a situation. And then you can learn how to act. And I that's what I was sort of gleaning from all of the geeky stuff that I would watch. And I'll tell you something. There's the very famous episode of The Twilight Zone called Time Enough at Last, where Burgess Meredith plays a browbeaten husband whose wife is very mean to him. And he's a bank teller. He's a simple man. And he is a nerd in this episode. Total nerd. All he wants to do all the time is read. That's it. That's all he ever wants to do is lose himself in flights of fancy. And he loves it. You know, and he's a bank teller. He even reads books at work and he gets in trouble. But his wife is so mean that she finds the books he's stashed around the house and she X's out all the pages. And when I watched that episode, by the way, one of the great episodes of The Twilight Zone, if you've never seen Time Enough at Last, you got to watch it. But even I believe it was Henry Bemis. Henry Bemis is his character's name. Even the name is nerdy. Henry Bemis. And I was like, I don't want to be like that dude. You know, as a little kid, Time Enough at Last has one of the great, if not the greatest Twilight Zone twist endings ever. I don't know what is. But even when I was watching that episode, even as a kid in elementary school, I wanted to like shake Mr. Bemis and go, dude, you are not leading your life in such a way as to be beneficial to yourself. You're going to get fired from your job. Nobody likes you. Your wife hates you. Why'd she even marry you in the first place? I don't know. Maybe you were a different kind of a guy. But I even knew as a kid, I'm like, you know what? Don't be like Henry Bemis. You know, be more like James Bond or Captain Kirk. And it was something that I just thought was, you know, obvious. Whether you're reading stories, you're watching the Adventures of Superman from the 50s. Superman and Clark Kent, they were ballers in that show. Clark Kent was not the mild-mannered, meek reporter that Christopher Reeve was in 1978 Superman the movie. No, Clark Kent was he was a strapping, handsome dude. He was a great reporter, and he would use his Superman persona to get the stories. He had a twinkle in his eye, and he was a guy you wanted to be. You wanted to be that Clark Kent almost as much as you wanted to be Superman. Not quite, but kind of. So I thought, but remember, I was alone in my devoted interest to all things geeky. I had nobody to talk to about this. I had no other friends that could confirm or deny these beliefs that I had. I was developing my geeky persona in my own way. And certainly my parents were always very encouraging. I liked other people. You know, other people were, after all, what stories were all about. How can you not love reading stories if you didn't want to go out and meet real people and see real stories unfolding before your eyes? So I was a very social kid. I, even as a really young kid, we lived in a neighborhood with lots of kids. It was fun to go play. We had a rich, there were some bullies in my neighborhood. I got bullied a lot by the older kids. And because I had a big mouth, I got in trouble. But I didn't, it was for me, it was, I guess, I don't know what I did, but I frequently, people my own age, I didn't, but I got beat up a lot. But it wasn't until later, as I got a little older, started to meet more people who had geeky interests as well. I started going to conventions, at first by myself, then with other people. And it quickly became apparent to me that not everybody felt the way I felt about the world at large. And it was at a science fiction convention I first heard the term mundane. Like, the people that weren't at the science fiction conventions were mundane. Like, they were somehow lesser people because we were the enlightened science fiction fans, and we read Robert Heinlein, and we read Asimov, and we read Frank Herbert, and we read Hal Clement, and we read all of these great authors. And we were somehow enlightened, or more enlightened than the rest of the world. And I thought that was strange. It was the first time I was like, wow, I'm here at a science fiction convention, and I'm hearing from people that should be my peeps that the world at large, that there was this division between us and them. And I remember, even as a kid, I want to say that the first time, I must have been like 12. I want to say I was either in 6th or 7th grade when I went on the bus by myself to this convention. And I was talking to adults, and it was strange to me that it really struck me as being odd that my people were sort of segregating themselves out from the Gen Pop because we were better somehow. Like, we knew something that they didn't know. And the funny thing about that was, and I'll be quite honest, if you looked around at all of the people at this science fiction convention, it wasn't exactly, well, to use Third Reich terms, we're not talking about the Aryan Brotherhood here. We're not talking about the Ubermensch. The people at these science fiction conventions were not exactly the kind of members of humanity that anybody would aspire to be. Now, am I profiling? Sure, I am. Now, but these were my people. And I was trying not to be discriminatory, but they were being discriminatory. And like, I never heard at this point in my life, nobody told me that I was some geeky Star Trek fan until or something was wrong for liking these geeky interests. Because when Star Wars came out and I was 10, I had friends that knew that I loved Star Trek and knew that I was really into it. Everybody loved Star Wars. Everybody. There was nobody, you didn't have jocks saying, oh, I'm going to go beat up the Star Wars fan. There was none of that. Everybody loved Star Wars. And the fact that I already knew something about science fiction actually benefited me. And as I've told people before, in my 4th grade class at Island Park Elementary School on Mercer Island, Washington, my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Walton, she read to us after recess at reading time. She read John Christopher's The White Mountains, The City of Gold and Lead, and The Pool of Fire, which in my mind at the time was the equivalent of the Harry Potter books for my 9 and 10-year-old mind. So this is my 4th grade teacher was reading science fiction, a story, a 3-book, a trilogy about an alien invasion of the Earth and what teenage boys were going to do about it. And I love this. I thought it was fantastic. So when I was 10 and onward for the next couple of years, I had no problem. My geeky interests were not looked down upon. They were not frowned upon. And indeed, the first time that I encountered this kind of us and them mentality was actually at a science fiction convention. And that was fairly like, I'm like, you know, none of the people that are dressed in Star Trek uniforms at this convention really look like they would be allowed into Starfleet, if you know what I'm saying. So this was we're talking 70s people, we're talking late 70s. So it was a revelation to me at the time, and it was relatively disturbing. Now, it wasn't until the next year when I was in the 7th grade. I've told this story before. I would sometimes get into it with the upperclassmen, like Jeff Rice, whose dad was my orthodontist, Dr. Rice, once dumped a plate of spaghetti on me in the, well, not that we had lunch in the gymnasium, but at South Mercer Junior High. And when he did that, he was a 9th grader, I was a 7th grader. I picked up the spaghetti, put it back on my plate, and then I went over to him and threw it back on him. And he was a 9th grader, which meant I got pummeled after school. But I mean, you know, why should I let anybody throw spaghetti on me, even if I'm a younger kid? And the thing was, at that time, I had a VCR, so I would invite people, including upperclassmen, over to my house to watch movies like Alien, which were R-rated, that nobody could see. So I tried to, you know, it was a give and take. But it wasn't until I was in the 7th grade that a kid named Brad Koval, who lived in my neighborhood, Brad was not a very good bully, but he did call me a Star Wars freako. He was like trying to come up with something, and actually everyone laughed at him when he came up with that. He was like, you Star Wars freako. And it was funny because that was the first time I was ever called anything derogatorily. Anybody used anything derogatorily against me because I was a geek, a Star Wars fan. And it was so funny because everyone kind of laughed at him. But I did, after that, get a taste of people, the geek set. As we moved into 7th grade, that's when people really started, their geekdom really set in. Like everybody was kind of the same in elementary school for the most part, but I went to a 3-year junior high school, and we moved into junior high school, people's personalities started to solidify. And I did notice that there were other geeky kids. And I met people that played role-playing games. It was Traveler and Dungeons and Dragons, which were really big. Then there was also another game called Boot Hill that people played. And I noticed there was fantasy fans, like people who love Lord of the Rings and the Sword of Shannara and the Chronicles of Thomas, Covenant the Unbeliever, you know, Lord Foulsbane and all that. And it was interesting because I was kind of friends with everyone because I had jobs, you know, I had a paper route, and I worked in a frame store, and I was a person of two worlds, really. I was sort of friends with everyone, but the geeky contingent was coming. I was watching it solidify. But I'd already had the experience of being told at a science fiction convention that we were somehow elite, and I didn't like that. I never liked that. I thought it was wrong, first of all, and also the guy that told me this, I'm like, you're coming. I don't want to be in your club, dude. let's just say that I'm trying to be kind, but it was very interesting, and it quickly became apparent to me. And I would go to more of these events. I went to more science fiction events, and I talked a little bit about how at the time, Seattle had a Star Trek organization called the PSST, the Puget Sound Star Trekkers. And they were, at the time, apparently, one of the largest Star Trek clubs in the United States. And they would put on pretty cool events. And at the same time, there was a group called the SCA, the Society for Creative Anachronisms. In a nutshell, they were kind of like Ren Fair people. Let's put it that way. I'm sure more people in the SCA now or whatever could shed more light. Ren Fair people were also people that I didn't really much get along with. I never wanted to live in the Middle Ages. I didn't see what the attraction was. When the Sandman ended, Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, and this is not to take it away from anybody who likes going to Ren Fairs. Now, I would never want to do that because there's a very active community, and I think that I don't want to alienate anybody, but there's a great, I think the final word on Ren Fairs was in one of the final issues of Neil Gaiman's The Sandman comic, where Hob Gadling, a character that actually lived through this period of time, he's immortal because death made him immortal, and he goes to a Ren Fair and has a lot to say about it. But there was groups, as I got older, there were various groups of people that were dividing themselves. And then, of course, there were metalheads, and metalheads were just as geeky. They just loved heavy metal. The thing is, the great thing about heavy metal, though, was girls were attracted to heavy metal too. So girls sort of came over to the heavy metal side. But as I was growing up, and everything was fractionalizing based on, and of course, like Jeffrey said, depending on your interests or your abilities, things were shaken out personality-wise throughout, and the social strata of junior high school was pretty much solidified, and that also moved into high school. But I was still lucky in that I was friends with pretty much everybody, which was good because I genuinely liked everybody. Even though I wasn't a part of your group, I liked the fact that you had a group. I thought that was cool, and I did like heavy metal music. You know, it wasn't my music of choice. I was very much into film soundtracks, but I watched these different groups solidify and everything. And I did have a few geeky friends, and I did go to these geeky concerns, and I went to more conventions, and I would sometimes go to role-playing. You could go to role-playing stores. They had lots of lead miniatures, and I would hang out there, and invariably a model kit store, a hobby store would also be a gaming store, and everybody would hang out there, and I'd listen to people talk. And it was very apparent to me that there was, even in the 7th grade, 8th grade, junior high, there was a lot of misogyny. There was a lot of guys in my circle that resented, they didn't like girls. And it wasn't because girls had cooties. It was because girls didn't like them. And they felt girls should like them. Because everybody feels people should like them. It's not girls want guys to like them and guys want girls to like them. But there was something happening that I watched happen as I got older, where these guys, because they were so steeped in science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and a lot of the people Conan the Barbarian, total alpha male, total example of maledom. I mean, you're reading books about Conan the Cimmerian, or you're reading comic books about your favorite superheroes, and you couldn't help but want to be those guys, the same way that I wanted to be James T. Kirk. But James T. Kirk was a man of action, a man of intellect. He wasn't brawny. He could fight, certainly, but he was not, of course, especially in the 3rd season, when he was basically, as we all know, Shatner had to wear a little help to keep his expanding tummy ready for the camera. And it was sort of interesting, because that was the first time that I heard guys talk about the fact that they deserved to get girls. Like, there wasn't a lot of talk about how they should make themselves more attractive to women, or figure out what makes girls tick, or better themselves. It was never their problem. The reason that girls didn't like them was the girls' problem. And I always thought that was strange. That didn't make sense to me, because I looked at these guys like the first guy who told me that there were mundanes out in the world and that we were better than them. I was looking at that guy going, dude, we're not better than them. Look at yourself. You know, I'm 12. I'm looking at this adult who was actually probably in college or something. And I'm like, brah. I didn't say brah. No one said brah back then. But I would, if I did know it, I would have been saying that, going, come on, dude. You know, you gotta help yourself out there, buddy. If you can't be putting down the rest of society if you yourself can't join society. And it was something that I was aware of at a very young age. And now, as I have grown older, and I've always, because I've gone to fan events, I've always been pretty accessible. I don't make myself inaccessible. I go to conventions, and indeed Comic-Con, my 31st Comic-Con, I go there to meet people. I go there to talk to people, and I've made myself pretty available for anybody to talk to me who wants to talk to me. And I leave my social media pretty open. You can DM me on Twitter if you want, and I do these chats. You can find me. You know, like Willem Dafoe said in To Live and Die in LA, I'm coming to this gym every week or every day for 10 years or something. I'm an easy man to find. You can find me. So I have a lot of people who do find me, and I do still to this day hear from a lot of people about a lot of guys who are not happy, let's say, with their situations. And there are a lot of people that are geeky, like Jeffrey said. And Jeffrey actually pointed out something. He's a Chinese kid in a predominantly white world, so he was facing an even greater difficulty. And that how do you deal with that? In our larger cities, California, it's not as much of a problem. But I'm sure back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, young Master Mao was probably hard pressed to find someone that would go out with him. I don't know, but according to his account, must have been pretty tough. Anyway, I'm going to go look and see what you guys have to say, because I saw some chats coming in. You were firing them in, so I'm going to see what anybody has to say. So let's see. Wow, there's a lot already. DJ CD01 says, "Hey, Rob, by the way, thank you for the generous support. That's very nice of you. Hey, Rob, I saw Jonathan Frakes at a con, and he loved the fact I remembered him on Dukes. I guess that's Dukes of Hazzard. Showing the pic I had to his handlers. One of the few people that got to kiss Daisy of the two hottest women at the time, her and Farrah." Well, that's true. Jonathan Frakes, he was a baller. That guy, loved Jonathan Frakes, and one of the nicest guys I've met in the business, and he's a terrific guy, very funny, very talented, and I'm with you. I think Jonathan Frakes is great. I want to thank you for the support of the channel. That's very nice of you. JB Bonifacio says, "The irony that geek subculture is now an epicenter of toxicity decades after being itself historically bullied is not lost on me." Well, I was going to get there. Yeah, yes, JB, you're absolutely correct. And especially over the last 10 years, the things that have gone on have been shocking to me, actually. Wade O'Neill is here. Thank you, Wade, for all the support you give me. Just like to give a shout out to the Edmonton International Fringe Festival, August 16th to August 25th, over 1,800 performers. It's the second biggest Fringe festival in the world. Need Microsoft Excel to keep track of what I want to see. Well, Wade, I've been to Edmonton. I got to show my movie Free Enterprise at what was called the Local Heroes Film Festival, and that was in Edmonton. We had a great time. It was really amazing. I got to meet Arthur Hiller, and Free Enterprise played on a double bill with the movie The Americanization of Emily, which I just thought was great. I'll tell you something funny, though. When we were at the Edmonton Film Festival, the Fringe Festival, there was a lot of Fringe types at that film festival. The Local Heroes Festival had a lot of Canadian-made films. That's why it's called Local Heroes. But we were brought up because, of course, we had both Eric McCormack and William Shatner in that movie. But I had an interesting experience at that film festival, and this does not reflect on the great people of Edmonton. Our film was one of the last films to screen. So we made friends with a lot of filmmakers, and there was a lot of different kinds of filmmakers there. There's a lot of alternative lifestyle LGBTQ people. I was friends with, as I said, I like people since I was a kid. Once they saw our movie Free Enterprise, however, we were a little ostracized. They looked at us. I don't know if they thought our movie was, I guess now we didn't have the term toxic masculinity, but definitely people said that our movie it wasn't indie enough, and that it was very Hollywood in its sensibilities. And I remember I was shunned a little bit after people came and saw the movie, which is okay. If you don't like my movie, that's fine. But it was interesting here I was, I'd been ensconced in the indie film world, and I'd worked my way up for 10 years in the entertainment business. And this is it was the first film festival I was at in Canada. And we were sort of shunned. Mark and I were sort of shunned by the response to our movie, which I thought was interesting. And again, even in the indie film community, there's tribalism. And it was quite interesting to see. We were sort of, oh, you guys are just, you're not really making indie movies. You're not really an ally or a friend to all of us marginalized or put upon people. You guys want to go work in Hollywood. And I was thinking to myself, like, don't we all? I mean, don't we all want to be able to make our movies and get them seen and make money so we make another one? But anyway, it was very interesting. But I loved Edmonton as a city. I thought it was great. I was also in Winnipeg at another leg of that film festival. It was split across 2 cities. And I love both cities. They're great. So I'm a huge, huge fan. David Goldstein says, have you seen the 4K transfer of Superman 1978? Yes, I have it. It's glorious. I think it's terrific. Really enjoy it. Sister Harrow says, well, sister, asks, hey, Rob, recently watched Snowpiercer with Chris Evans, and that had an interesting viewpoint of humanity. What do you think about the movie being rebooted as a series by the Orphan Black writer director? Well, Sister Harrow, I really like Snowpiercer. Snowpiercer is, of course, I think it's Bong Joon-ho, right? I forget the name. The Korean director. It's a great movie. I really enjoyed it. A terrific science fiction film based on a graphic novel. And for those of you who don't know what Snowpiercer is, or if you haven't seen Snowpiercer, it's basically set on a train. It's sort of, I guess, after a climate apocalypse or apocalypse, the world, basically the rest, all of civilization is on this train that travels around the world. That's all it does, is travel around the world. And inside the train, the remainder of society has completely been stratified. Like the poor have to live in the back, and you've got the wealthy elites that live in these beautiful train cars and they want for nothing. And it's a very interesting, it's one of the most unique dystopian civilizations we've ever seen on film before, but they've turned it into a TV series. And it's had a very difficult march to the small screen, but I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be great. I when they told me it was going to, well, when they told me, it's like they didn't call me up and go, hey, Rob, we're making a Snowpiercer series. When I'd heard it was going to be a TV series, I was like, really? That's interesting. I was like, okay, I can't wait to see it. I just don't know how long can they sustain it. Like, how many stories can you tell on that train? But it'll be interesting. I am looking for forward to the show. Cardinal Sin is here. He says, what's the difference between color grading and timing? Absolutely nothing. I really think the term grade, I used to hear color timing before. The first time I think I ever heard color grading was when I was working on the Fellowship of the Ring, the extended version of Fellowship of the Ring. When we were doing the documentaries, I edited a piece together about color grading, the software they were using to grade the film, to give it a color grade. They're the same thing. The idea is, before the digital world, you could only color time your film using the photochemical process. So you didn't have nearly the leeway that you have now. And when you got into color grading, it was, oh my God, you were left with so many more options, and you could literally get in and bring up the light around someone's eyes. So I think color timing is a vestige of the past. I use both terms interchangeably. A lot of people are like, color timing, what are you talking about? I mean, to be honest, maybe color timing came from how long you left the negative in a certain bath or something. Now I want to know. I got to go back and look. I've just always called it color timing, but I started calling it color grading after 2001. But it's basically the same thing. Willow Yang is here. Hello, Willow. TNG's Symbiosis, Willow says, that would be the Next Generation's episode, first season episode, Symbiosis, isn't terrible, but the forced anti-drug public service announcement between Wesley and Yar might be the cringiest scene I've seen in Star Trek thus far. Yeah, because the youth of the universe, Wesley Crusher, could be susceptible to being a big stoner in that episode. But what was kind of cool was having Merritt Buttrick, who, of course, was in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, as Kirk's son. And, of course, Joaquin, Khan's right-hand man, in teaming up again. So that was kind of cool about symbiosis. Judson Scott. Judson Scott was the actor who played Joaquin. And he was also in I think The Phoenix. There was a TV series called The Phoenix that he was in. JB Bonifacio says, "We are the future, R&B, not them." That's, of course, a Magneto. That's a Magneto line from the X-Men. Are we? I don't know. But so listen, I wanted to continue on and read more. So yesterday, and I'm not going to get into a gun debate. My feelings about firearms are this: we as a nation, there's plenty of people that, let's face it, love their guns. There are plenty of law-abiding, responsible gun owners all across this land. But you know what? One kid ruins it for the whole class. That's what I grew up learning. I mean, we still take our shoes off at the airport because one guy once tried to light a bomb in his shoe, and we're still taking our shoes off. But apparently, with guns, hey, we don't want to get in there and do anything about it. We have now made it, whether we want to admit it or not, we like our guns in the United States more than we like the lives of individual people. Period. We do. And my feeling about guns before I read this article is this: it takes me 6 months to be able to get a driver's license. That means I'm taking driver's ed courses. I have to memorize a whole manual. I get tested. I don't understand why it shouldn't take 6 months to get a gun. You need to take courses. You need to read firearm safety books. You then need to be tested. And in addition to that, I would say you have to pass a mental health exam. To me, that's a simple fix. It's a way we could probably eliminate a lot of what's going on. And not everybody, you cannot buy a gun without going through this process, period. Doesn't matter what kind of a firearm it is. That's my thoughts on the subject, but I don't want to get into that. There is an article that I read that I think goes along with the idea of misogyny that Jeffrey Mao's letter brought up. And I read it yesterday on Medium, and I thought it was really interesting. And the article is, so I looked this one up. I did post it to Twitter, and I did put it on my Facebook page. The article is How White Nationalism Courts Internet Nerd Culture. And the idea of misogyny that Jeffrey wrote in about and white nerd culture, I think it's all part of the same thing. Because over the last 10 years, as JB pointed out, we've had very interesting things happen in the science fiction world. For those of you, I've talked about the rabid and the sad puppies controversy, how the Hugo Awards were basically hijacked by a faction of, let's call them traditionalists, who did not like all of the new voices, the new previously marginalized voices, women, LGBTQ voices, that started writing science fiction. And they wanted more traditional, and I would say, when I say traditional, more return to traditional values of space opera, things like that. And they tried to game the system. Then, of course, we had Gamergate. And then there's Comicsgate. And I know, Mark C., I know. But I saw there at its core, there was deeply rooted misogyny amongst hatred of a lot of other things as part of all of this. And it's been in fan culture. And when it comes right down to it, and I watch all these channels, I still do. And whether they're going to, everyone's like, oh, no, I'm not misogynistic. Yeah, I don't know. I think that fan culture is deeply misogynistic. And now with social media, that misogyny can be shared. And I wanted to read a bit of this article, and I think everybody should read it. How White Nationalism Courts Internet Nerd Culture. Nerd and online. Oh, wait. Let me see. It was written by DEO. And DEO, this is how he defines himself: loud Tasmanian devil lady, proud union journeywoman, millwright and pipe welder, communist, feminist, anti-fascist, love art, history, and volunteering. And I know that some of you right there are like tuning out. But here's the thing. It doesn't mean how somebody identifies their politics doesn't necessarily mean that when they're writing something, you should immediately dismiss it. I don't. I read the articles when something like this comes up, and I found this article to be quite compelling, and I'm going to read some of it. Nerd and online communities are ripe harvesting ground for neo-Nazism. Bigotry festers like a wound, and preventing society and subcultures from going gangrene is about knowing the warning signs, identifying it early, and preventing the spread. White supremacist groups have strategies that work on selling people on their beliefs. I'm going to discuss a few here and how these tactics are especially appealing towards internet nerd spaces. Isolated, lonely, insecure, unfulfilled, bitter young men who feel that society at large has abandoned them and denies them the opportunities they feel entitled to are prime targets. White supremacist recruiters approach these angry young men online and tell them that they are special and have a greater destiny. They are told that every white man carries this legacy mantle of superiority because every white man bears the lineage of advancements and accomplishments of all white men throughout history. That every white man is imbued by his forefathers with an important destiny to defend the white race. Thus, the lonely NEET need not achieve anything himself to still hold this position of power and supremacy. His accomplishments that the recruiter can flatter him for is simply that he was born with white skin. These tactics transform nerdy, bullied young men into proud white warriors, making them useful tools for the promotion and growth of the white supremacist ideology and agenda. Neo-Nazi groups know utilizing the insecurity and loneliness in their targets is an effective recruiting and radicalizing tactic, especially when tailored to the large audience of socially awkward internet nerds. Another key strategy in white supremacist recruitment are online communities that warmly welcome in new members. Once lured into such a group, the recruit is given a surge of support, validation, and esteem boosting. The new members are told they belong, that they may not fit in real life social cliques, but that they fit into this group, and that the other group members care about them. Hours will be invested in grooming the new recruit, befriending and talking with them. Active chats or websites like 4chan and 8chan are appealing to those who are bored and isolated and only want some human contact, but have trouble getting it elsewhere due to social awkwardness. It's the same thing, man. It's the same thing. We as human beings, we all want connection with other people. We all want to be loved by members of whoever it is we want to be loved by, whether it's same sex, whether it's opposite sex. We all want that connection with people. And if we're not getting it and we get isolated, I completely understand. Now, this article is really interesting because it goes on and offers a lot of facts and figures, and it's a really long article. But I would suggest everybody read it. I'll post it in the description of this chat below. But really what it comes down to ultimately, to me, to my way of thinking, is that we just want connection. All of us. You know, we want to belong. We want to know that we matter to other people. And if we feel isolated and we feel like we're powerless, we can go online and we can find these organizations, or we can find other like-minded people, or people that are gonna play into those things that they know that we're feeling, and they're going to give us what we want. And in the case of a lot of nerd culture, I just use the white supremacy as an example because that's been on everyone's mind because of what happened over the weekend. But it's also true of any subculture. Anybody, welcome, come be part of our group, you know. And what I discovered as a kid was I went into a group that I thought I wanted to be a part of, which was other science fiction fans, and I encountered this idea that people that weren't part of our group were somehow lesser than we were. Even science fiction fans called the public at large mundanes. And by the way, that still goes on. I've been hearing it my whole life. Like, aren't we so enlightened because we read science fiction? Well, that might be true, but you're not enlightened enough that you can go hit the gym or, you know, play some pickup basketball with some friends or whatever. And I think that the tribalism that we all are experiencing, especially because the internet has made us we can find our own tribes. You can go online and find whatever tribe you want to be a part of, and it becomes very alluring. And I just think that ultimately we need to be more mindful of each other and more mindful of the fact that, like, we're all Americans, first of all. Actually, we're not all Americans because this is an international audience. Let's go even further. We are all human beings, part of the planet, on this planet. And I haven't traveled everywhere, but I've traveled enough to know that there's pretty great people pretty much everywhere you go. And we're really not that different. And I think that's something that we all need to be mindful of. And, you know, whenever we're going to do something at the expense of others, I think that that's when we have to take a step back and wonder, why are we doing that? How have we suddenly been put in a position where we're supposed to tell other people what to do? Or wouldn't we bring those people in and make a decision together? Like, isn't that what is the best way to move forward? That's kind of what I always thought. I mean, I might be wrong, but I think that's the only way that we're going to succeed. And if you look at all of the manifestos and the things that are being written, they all contain hatred of certain groups of people. One group of people hates another group of people. One group of people is worried that they're going to be somehow marginalized. What's really interesting is I'm living through a period of time where I'm the enemy. I'm the white cis privileged male that has never known what it's like to be oppressed. And in my case, that's pretty much true. I'll own that. You know, I've led a pretty damn good life where I haven't had a lot of opportunities denied me. That doesn't mean it's not hell on earth trying to get a movie made, or that doesn't mean I don't bang my head against a wall in my chosen profession every single day, because I do. There's been nothing easy about working in the entertainment business. Being a white man has not given me any extra privilege. I don't care what you say. It hasn't helped me raise financing for my projects and get them made. Now, I'm not comparing and contrasting myself, because the one thing about Hollywood is it's equally horrific for everyone. Hollywood is an equal opportunity destroyer of lives. So I have no illusions about that. But I mean, you know, we live in a world where we have tribalism, and one group of people always wants to impart their will on another group of people. You'll never win. That way, you're doomed to do that. And one day we'll truly be able to look at the world from the perspective of outer space and see that all of us are human beings, members of the spaceship Earth. Just because you live in a certain country or a certain region or a certain state doesn't mean you necessarily should be hating on somebody, your neighbor, or somebody that lives 1,000 miles south of you because they live in a less privileged area, or an area that doesn't, say, speak your language or whatever. Because at the end of the day, one thing I've learned about being a human being is that all of us, for the most part, want the same things. We all want to lead healthy lives, happy lives, take care of our children, and be able to pursue those things we want to pursue. I think that's pretty universal. And when you're not able to do those things, you get caught up and wrapped up in ideologies that are going to, hopefully, you think, bring you the fulfillment in your life that you're not getting any other way. But I don't think that ever leads anywhere good. I could be wrong, though. I just like to think that one day, all of us, we're going to celebrate our differences. We're all going to enjoy being human beings on the planet Earth. At least I would hope so. AJ Lancaster says, my favorite criticism of the past year: more people criticized Michael B. Jordan for being too short to be Superman than criticized his skin color. Well, at least we're learning. At least we're off. I mean, Michael B. Jordan is, in my mind, I mean, he is one handsome specimen of a human male, that man. I mean, come on. In between Creed and Killmonger, who wouldn't want to look like Michael B. Jordan? Let me just tell you, I've loved that man since Friday Night Lights. I got great big love for Michael B. Jordan, and anybody that thinks he's too short. See, that's the thing. Let's look at a prime specimen of the human male, someone like Michael B. Jordan, and let's find, we geeks will look at this beautiful man with this incredibly chiseled physique, and we'll find he's too short. Leave it to us. Leave it to us. Leave it to my fellow geeks. I love y'all. Leave it to my fellow geeks. He's too short to be Superman. That's the problem? Crazy. Stubble McShave says, today, Fandom Entertainment released a great doc on Dungeons and Dragons. In it, they bring up that historically, many people were excluded. Now there's more inclusivity. Stubble, I totally agree. One of the great things about fan culture now, and I'll never understand it, is that it is so inclusive. There's more all ages, all sizes, all colors, all creeds. There's more people, more boys and girls sharing their love of genre fiction, science fiction, fantasy, horror than ever before. And it's made the fan space that much better. How much more fun is it going to Comic-Con? And I'll flat out say, I mean, the one thing about Comic-Con, I've loved the fact that there's all these girls cosplaying these incredible outfits. Although, frankly, now walking around the floor at Comic-Con just sometimes makes me feel guilty and like a dirty old man because I might linger a little too long on that Psylocke over there, or that Sailor Moon girl over there, or that Supergirl in front of me. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the older I get, the feel like maybe I shouldn't be going to Comic-Con because I'm enjoying it a little too much. But yes, I mean, I think in fan circles now we are living through a time that's an embarrassment of riches. If you want to go to a convention and meet a like-minded girl, you can, because they're there. You want to go to the comic book store, you want to go to the game store, you want to go to the video store or the video game store. There's girls there, people. We live in a golden age of fandom, and yet there's deep misogyny. There's still that going on, even though now there's more women in the fan space. There's more people of all kinds in the fan space than ever before, and that's great. But yes, it's crazy. Alexander Wilson says, Disney just had a bad earnings report and Fox dragged them down, with Dark Phoenix being a huge loss. What is your opinion on the matter? Well, first of all, Disney had nothing to do with making Dark Phoenix, and it's just a write-off as far as they're concerned. I mean, they're going to, of course, the merger with Fox was going to be a huge hit on Disney, a huge hit. It's a momentary correction. Their earnings lost because, yes, after the merger happened, Dark Phoenix was released. It wasn't Disney's fault. These are the things that they're just going to be incurring as they absorb Fox. But I'll tell you something, Disney's having a great year, the best year any studio has ever had as far as movies are going. I mean, Toy Story 4 is about to pass $1 billion. Aladdin passed $1 billion. Of Spider-Man Far From Home, released by Sony, also passed $1 billion. I wouldn't be surprised if Frozen 2 and The Rise of Skywalker are $1 billion grossing movies. Disney is killing it. Their streaming service is going to make oodles of money. I am not worried about Disney at all. I think they're doing great. Let's see what we've got here. Stubble McShave, he also sent in a letter. And I'm going to read his letter because I thought it was good. So, Stubble, not only can I thank you for your super chat, I'm going to read your letter, sir. This one comes from Stubble McShave. Hi, Rob. As I mentioned in a super chat on the show, the letter about the flaws of Superman made me want to respond about character flaws and character limitations in a letter. This is my way of looking at flaws for characters and breaking them down. I have found inspiration for this through my own excursions into writing as well as from other sources. Now, what about character flaws? Well, I like to break down character flaws into different categories of flaws and limitations. There are basically 3 different kinds of flaws and limitations for characters in my mind, and they are physical and mental limitations, handicaps, character flaws. Let's start with physical and mental limitations. These are the things that are internal burdens to the character that they can't change, but they have to work around. Examples of this would be a broken leg, a brain injury, depression, kryptonite for Superman. These physical and mental limitations are the facts that your characters have to deal with and compensate for. Handicaps are not what you first think of. Handicaps are external limitations on your character. There are things that are a burden to the character that could be changed, but that we don't want to change. Examples of handicaps for Superman would be his code of ethics, his Superman complex, which is that you must save everyone and do everything right, Martha Kent, Lois Lane. These handicaps may be a burden for the character and may be used against him or her, but we don't want the character to get rid of them. Now, what about character flaws? These are flaws that may be the character's fault and something that they can overcome. They don't have to be the character's fault, but they always have the ability to overcome them if they want to. The character flaws are often what can be changed over time for a character to make them have a character arc. The flaws can be both overcome or established to create the arc. One such character flaw is selfishness. Examples of characters who've overcome selfishness are Han Solo and Private Trip from Glory. Character flaws may be earth-shattering, like being a sadist or a serial killer, but they can also be more relatable and mundane, such as selfishness, being shy, having an addiction, not dealing with an affliction very well, anger management issues, and many more. It's much more interesting to make a character with character flaws that can be overcome. Batman is a very flawed character, has a ton of character flaws which could be overcome if he wanted to, and if he went to a lot of therapy. It's much easier to make Batman relatable and interesting to an audience than Superman, who's mainly got kryptonite and different handicaps in the form of codes of honor and friends. There are 3 characters that are more interesting than Superman in the 1978 movie: Lex Luthor, Lois Lane, and Clark Kent. That's right, Clark Kent is much more interesting than Superman in that movie, and that's mainly because of his awkwardness and shyness towards Lois Lane. When they later got rid of that character flaw for Clark Kent, he got much more boring. And I think that's one of the problems with the new iterations of Superman. They've gotten rid of Clark Kent persona, and that was a major thing that made him interesting in the movies. Without Clark, there's not that much to work with to make him interesting and relatable. Well, that's what I have to say on that subject. So, Rob, what are your thoughts on the flaws and limitations of characters, and what do you think of separating them in this way? Do you get what I mean with handicaps not being physical handicaps, but rather things that are burdens on the character that we don't want to get rid of? As I've had a tendency to do, I will end this with a Wheel of Time quote. There is one rule above all others for being a man. Whatever comes, face it on your feet. Thanks, Stubble. Well, Stubble, that's a great Wheel of Time quote. Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think it's the great thing about all characters is when you give them, you can call them handicaps or you can call them traits, whatever you want to call them. But yes, it's no fun to watch a character who's perfect. I mean, most stories are about a character overcoming something, some part of him or herself that is there, a burden. Forrest Gump, he's obviously a bit developmentally disabled, but that didn't stop him from overcoming those hurdles and becoming a more interesting character. But I think that's the key. All characters need to overcome both their internal and external struggles, whatever those may be. And that's what makes for interesting characters. But you have to have characters that have internal and external struggles to be interesting. Otherwise, why are you following their story? Because through how a character handles those internal and external struggles, it illuminates the truth of that story. So that's having these kinds of whatever you want to call them. You want to call them character traits. You want to call them handicaps. That is the essence, the very essence of great storytelling. So, and I liked how you broke it down. I thought it was succinct and easy to understand. I like that. I'll probably refer back to your letter the next time I'm writing a new story myself. This is, again, a little bit of a political topic, and this actually comes from another longtime member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, Emmanuel Ericart. He's from Argentina. And we've edited this letter a little bit for clarity, but I'm going to read this. Hi, Rob. I promised some video game letters. Sadly, this is not the case, at least not in the way I want to make them. I am a person that tries to stay away from politics, since politics and corruption has had a big impact on my life and health, and is one of the reasons why I had to drop out of college. I was an architecture student. My life took a 180-degree turn to the worst, but that is a tale for another dime. Also, I don't like to talk about another country's politics since I'm not there, but when they are pointing the media to art and something I love, I just can't ignore it. Yes, I'm talking about violence and video games. My heart broke the other day after the news on El Paso. There is nothing more sad than seeing innocent people lose their lives because someone decided to take them. What a sad world we live in. My heart from Argentina goes to everyone in your country. So I was watching the news and the same story kept repeating again and again. Let's blame movies and video games. An old chestnut, sir, that has been going on since I've been alive. Some books said that dinosaurs went extinct. Others said they evolved into birds. After today, I believe dinosaurs evolved into politicians and media. Life finds a way. There's nothing more sad and pathetic than how, after an incident of this kind, the media talks about movies and video games as the core of the problem. They claim the violence in video games and movies triggers people with mental health issues to go outside and kill others. I should ask how a person with mental problems had access to the gun he used. Why does the media go easier on the issue of access to a weapon than they do on the issue of access to mental health care and prevention? But no, instead they blame art, because to them, art is not expression. It's just a brainwashing machine that turns people into killers. Let me tell you, video games and movies are far from that. In my case, video games are a big part of my life. After all, what happened to me, depression and anxiety appeared in my life, and they are a tough enemy to beat. Video games and movies help me deal with them, giving me a place where I could turn my brain off for a little while and gather strength to continue my own battle. Video games and movies inspired me to continue with my dreams and achievements now as a 3D modeler. I'm not a rich person. I have to work to pay for college, and one of those jobs is in architectural 3D modeling. Where I live, 3D modeling school is not something I can find down the block, so I've had to teach myself the same way I had to learn English. You can see my English is not the best, but movies and video games help me to learn. And that gives me access to a lot of things, like English tutorials, or shows and communities like yours, where I can express myself, even when I imagine it can be a pain in the ass to read my letters. Now inspired by video games, I'm learning other programs and expanding my modeling and texturing to any kind of objects as a hobby. Thanks to that, my hobby is now a part-time job and I'm making money. Not much, but it helps. And that is happening on a social video game. So Robert and everyone else out there, including the media dinosaurs, I ask you, how something that inspires me to be creative, something that teaches me a lot of things, something that helps me to battle health and mental issues each day, something crafted from a creative and passionate mind, how can that be so evil it makes a person go kill others? I have the answer. Art in any shape or form is not evil. Art is not dangerous. But what I find dangerous is that we, in 2019, have dinosaurs with access to power in politics and in the media that prefer to talk about art and violence rather than talk about a way to address the real issues that we have. Sorry for this little rant, Rob, and for my rustic language. I promise my next letters will be fun and crafted for a conversation on things we love and not about what we hate. And also not on dinosaurs unless they have Jeff Goldblum the king between them. Goodbye from Argentina, Manu, like Ginobili. Manu, short for Emmanuel. Well, Manu, thank you very much for this letter. Look, I think whenever there's problems in society, everybody wants a quick fix. Everybody wants to take a pill. Everybody wants to feel better. So they point to things like violent video games, such as, of course, Call of Duty or any first-person shooter, and they're going to say that those video games caused this person to do what this person did. No, I think what I read in the letter, that article, and what we were talking about earlier, I think our society, and I mean American society, we are no longer doing for individuals what we used to do. Look, there's always been disaffected, disenfranchised, lonely people in the world, but they no longer have access to mental health care. Why does mental health care have a dollar value associated with it? Can you make even money from mental health care? Sure, therapists make a lot of money. But what about finding people that feel lonely and disenfranchised? And what about mental health care on a daily basis? I think it all comes back to the fact that our society, as we have more and more income inequality, Our society is no longer balanced. It's all about let's get as much as you can while you can when you can, and fuck your fellow man. Well, even all the lessons in life are in the Godfather movies, and yes, even in Godfather 3. And Michael Corleone is explaining when he's trying to take over International Immobiliare, he's trying to explain that helping one's fellow man is in fact profitable. It might not be a profit the same way a profit is on your quarterly earnings reports, but what we have forgotten in this country is that a civil society is the very basis that makes everything else work. If our civil society collapses, we're not going to have people who are able to go shop in stores. I mean, we're already allowing it to happen. We have this incredible homeless problem that in our desire to help people and be progressive, we are not doing the hard things that need to be done. We're not spending the kind of money that needs to be spent to help our homeless problem, and it is increasing at an exponential rate. And it's because where's the profit? All anybody cares about is profit. And the problem is we're going to be seeking profit into oblivion. And unfortunately, a civil society, we should couch health and education as a national security issue. The first thing the United States should be all about is making sure we have the healthiest and the most educated population in the world, both of which we do not do, not even close. Of course, the cynics will all come out and go, no, the elites don't want a healthy, educated population. Well, that might be true, but we're being very short-sighted. I think that the best way to help one another, the best way to stop all of these things is we need to have all kinds of gun regulation. I think, after the initial outcry and people screaming bloody murder and the NRA and all of the policy wonks and all of the lobbyists in Washington, D.C., after the first couple of years, having a 6-month training period, a 6-month waiting period, and a mental health evaluation to own a firearm, in 5 years, that'll be par for the course. That's what we have to do. And that's period. You cannot own a gun unless you take a 6-month course, that you have a mental health evaluation by mental health professionals. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? I mean, the Second Amendment does say we have to have a well-trained and regulated or well-regulated militia. What is training and if not well-regulated? Mental health, make sure people, it's simple. It's a simple, I don't understand why the NRA doesn't just come out and go, we're making guns just like cars. You have to go to 6 months worth of classes. Then you have to prove that you can handle a firearm. Train people. Put them in active shooter events. See if they can carry a gun. See if they have the ability to do so in high-pressure situations. Look what happened in Walmart today. A Walmart where in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 2 people pulled guns out that they were carrying and started shooting at each other. We are not mature enough as a nation anymore to have guns. We just aren't. Now, I know we have a rich history of having guns. Why not just why don't we do that? It's an easy fix. You're not saying people can't have guns. 6-month course, mental health evaluation, and then you're tested as to whether or not you should have a firearm. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, we do that with cars. I don't know. That's what I say. I think it's an easy fix. I think any politician who comes out and says that, and if the government passes through, people will cry out for a year or two, and then everyone's like, of course, that's the way we should do things, when they watch how many gun deaths don't happen anymore. This is an interesting letter. First of all, actually, let me see what you guys have to say. Emmy is here. Emmy is here. I love Emmy's letters. I haven't seen Emmy in a while. Emmy says, space will bring about utopia. Sadly, not bloody likely. Our ability to break free from Earth's gravity is far outpacing the evolution of empathy. What a great point. Yeah, I mean, frankly, what I think humanity really needs is a pandemic that wipes out 90% of the human population. So we forget, we will remember those 10%, those survivors will remember what is best in life. And it is not to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of the women. It's not that. Look, I think it goes hand in hand. I think human progress, there is no doubt that the space race brought us more technological advances in a shorter period of time than probably ever before. And we are going to learn more about ourselves. Look, one of the things about going to space, it's not going to bring about a utopia, but it's going to encourage science. It's going to encourage engineering. It's going to encourage health, collective dreaming. I think we do need these kinds of bold steps. We need to move out into the final frontier. I think that's all part of it. That's just one facet of human evolution. And look, when people are working collectively together on a project, like, say, putting men on the moon, you have hundreds of thousands of people who are working together towards a goal. And in a way, it's an intangible goal for most of the people working on the project. They're not going to the moon, but they can share in an endeavor where all of their contributions matter. How many people, like one of my favorite episodes of From the Earth to the Moon, it's if you get a chance, it was recently released on Blu-ray. Even though the Blu-ray is somewhat disappointing, the HBO miniseries From the Earth to the Moon, there's an episode called Spider. I think it's episode 5. And it's all about the development of the LEM, the Lunar Excursion Module. And if you ever want to watch something uplifting about humanity, I know somebody's going to watch it and go, oh, it was a sausage fest. There was all dudes. Well, yes. I mean, at the time in the 60s, you can watch Hidden Figures and see the flip side of that. But unfortunately, there was a lot of geeky dudes with slide rules that got us to the moon. That's a historical fact. We can't get around it. But I don't think space will bring about utopia, Emmy. I don't at all. But you're absolutely right. What will is the evolution of empathy. And what we don't have, as a matter of fact, we have a devolution of empathy. If there's one thing we need, it's the empathy for people. Somehow our social media, the greatest communications device, the internet, the greatest mode of communication ever created by man, somehow is also this insidious device that makes us apt to hate people. It makes us easier to group ourselves into tribes on the internet and to be preyed upon by white supremacists or the rabid and sad puppies. I mean, the fact is, we're all in this together. We're all on this planet together. We're all part of the human species. And it's not going to change anytime soon. And I think going to space gets a lot of people working on a lot of crazy new stuff. And that collective dream is something that's going to benefit humanity in the long run, which is why I am a big proponent of all kinds of exploration, whether it's going to the bottom of the sea, whether it's that kid who's figured out how to get microplastics out of the ocean, which is amazing. I think the space program can inspire a lot of people to do a lot of great things. Anyway, here's a quick letter. This comes from David Miller, a.k.a. Doc Civil, longtime member of the Post-Geek Singularity. Doc Civil says, hi, Rob. This will be a quick one. Do you think movie studios have a vested interest in dumbing down the audience's tastes or expectations when it comes to movies and television in order to make the audience have a taste for crap? Because, one, making crap entertainment is easier to do, and two, it's cheaper to make crap entertainment. Very much interested in how you are going to respond to this. Take care, David M. Well, first of all, I would say this. I do not think making crap entertainment is easier to do, and it's cheaper to make crap entertainment. I agree with that. I agree with, yes, it is cheaper to make crappy programming because you don't have to spend as much money or time as it requires to make great programming. But here's the thing, especially when it comes to movies. Nobody, I will say this right now, nobody who works at a studio and no filmmakers, nobody ever sets out to make a shitty movie. Everybody sets out to make a great film. No matter what level you're working at, movie making is so hard. It is so time consuming and it costs so much money, especially at the studio level. Everyone, I know it seems strange for me to say this and odd for me to say this. And people are like, Burnett's a studio shill. No, I'm not. No one's paying me. Please, I will shill. I will bend over, whatever you want. Give me money, studios. I will work for you. I'll do whatever you want. Just pay me ungodly sums of funds and I will do what you say. Because I am tired of struggling, which I do every day. But anyway, studios, believe it or not, and the networks, everybody is trying to provide the greatest entertainment they can provide. Everybody wants to make great entertainment. The problem is not a lot of people know how to do that. They want to do it, but they don't know how. And human beings are weak, and we succumb to ego, and we succumb to the fact that we're insecure, and all of our human frailties are what prevent us from making great entertainment. I love nothing more than to work with a great producer, a great director, or even as a director working with a great producer and a great cameraman. And I like working as an editor. I love working with people. I have perhaps an exciting new project to work on as of yesterday that I think is going to be really cool. It needs a little bit of tender love and care, but I think it's really cool, and I'm happy to be a part of it in some small way. Now, this project, when it was sort of offered to me to work on, I didn't sit there and go, I'm only playing a small part. I'm like, yeah, I'm playing a small part, but it could be integral to the success of the overall project, and I'm happy to do it. And I think that's really, really cool. So anyway, yeah, indeed. But I don't think anybody wants to make crap entertainment. I think that there's a lot of people that do make crap entertainment because they know it, they can sell it and make money. But not movies. I don't think anyone's, at least at the studio level. Sure, there's a lot of low budget filmmakers. They know. I mean, Anthony Ferrani, the director of the Sharknado movies, a friend of mine, will tell you exactly they are what they are. But you know what? Even Anthony Ferrani, who is working on the Sharknado movies, even he puts his own time and money and effort in to make those movies the best Sharknado movies they can be. And I think most people are really trying to make the best things they can be, or make the best things they can make. I really do. Studios certainly are. And I mean, movie making is so hard. It's always better to try and make something good than trying to make crap. This is an interesting letter. This comes from Wilson Hugh. Hello, Robert. I hope this letter finds you well. I have watched many, if not all, of your conversations on YouTube and share your love of Star Trek. Just recently, I was able to get my hands on the graphic novel for Harlan Ellison's City on the Edge of Forever from IDW and Eagle Moss. Eagle Moss, by the way, has done a great collection of Star Trek graphic novels. And I love Eagle Moss. I love what they've done with the Star Trek ships. I love their extra large version of Star Trek ships. I haven't bought any, but I want them all. Eagle Moss should just send them to me and I'll review them on the show. The one thing I'm getting from Eagle Moss now is their 1/8 scale Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger. As you get 4 issues a month, and eventually I'm going to build it into a car that's like this big. That's cool. That's my one Eagle Moss thing I've allowed myself. I was able to get my hands on the graphic novel for Harlan Ellison's City on the Edge of Forever from IDW and Eagle Moss, and now understand why Harlan felt as he did about the film version when compared to what he wrote. As good as the televised version of City on the Edge of Forever was, Ellison's original screenplay, I feel, is a better story. For those of you who don't know, one of the great episodes of Star Trek, if not the greatest episode of the original series, City on the Edge of Forever, was originally written by the famed and very cantankerous and beloved Harlan Ellison, but it was changed radically from what he originally wrote to what made it on the screen for various reasons, which you could see if you've read the script. But what IDW did, they adapted, along with, I believe the Tipton brothers worked with him on it, they adapted his original script into comic book form. So you can get that and really get a sense of what it's like. And it's really good. It's really good. Not to discount Gene L. Kuhn, D.C. Fontana, and Gene Roddenberry's work on making the script filmable, but Ellison's original story has an elegance to it that has changed by the time William Shatner and Joan Collins got their thespian hands on the teleplay. What we got on screen was a crushing love story that made us think about how hard it was for Kirk to do what was needed to restore the universe. What was in the original teleplay, however, was a question about the significance and insignificance of an individual, about a person's place and role in the universe, how 2 people's lives affect Kirk, Edith Keeler, and a soldier who fought at Verdun. One deemed insignificant, the other deemed negligible. Hang on a second, something's going on here. I think I'm going to have to stop broadcasting because there's 2 girls who are screaming and yelling. So I'm going to get off this chat, right now and see what happens when two teenage girls are fighting. Apparently, okay, maybe they've stopped fighting, so I can keep going. Anyway, let me start again. Not to discount Gene L. Kuhn, Dorothy Fontana, and Gene Roddenberry's work on making the script filmable, but Ellison's original story has an elegance to it that is changed by the time William Shatner and Joan Collins get their thespian hands on the teleplay. What we got on screen was a crushing love story that made us think about how hard it was for Kirk to do what was needed to restore the universe. What was in the original teleplay, however, was a question about the significance and insignificance of an individual, about a person's place and role in the universe, how two people's lives affect Kirk, Edith Keeler and a soldier who fought at Verdun. One seemed insignificant, the other seemed negligible by the Guardians of Forever. The two stories, very similar, yet so different. Have you had a chance to look through the graphic novel? And if so, what do you think about Ellison's original teleplay? On a separate note, I agree that Star Trek The Motion Picture is very underrated and is one of the two that I put on in the background while I'm working around the apartment. The other is Star Trek The Final Frontier. Yes, the William Shatner directed one where a god is questioned about why it needs a ship. Thing is, other than the motion picture, it's the only other movie involving the original series crew that employs a story that is of the type used in the original TV series. My complaints about the movie are minimal. It could have had a bigger budget, and the script could have gone through another pass, and I wish it didn't try so hard to be like the previous film, but all in all, it's not a bad Star Trek movie. I'd watch it over any of the bad robot ones. In fact, I'd watch Star Trek Insurrection or Nemesis over any of the bad robot movies. But I think Star Trek The Final Frontier doesn't get a fair chance with many fans, either due to it being overshadowed by the more popular entries or because the story synopsis, just how Star Trek The Motion Picture doesn't get a fair chance. What do you think? It's always a pleasure to watch and listen to your streams, especially when people aren't yelling in the background. Cheers, Wilson H. Well, okay, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, the story that Harlan Ellison wrote, the script that Harlan Ellison wrote for City on the Edge of Forever is incredibly dense. And you only have 52 minutes with classic Star Trek. And I think how it was condensed worked really, really well. Bringing in another character that affects Kirk might have been, it's just too much. I mean, you've got the journey through time. You've got missing McCoy. The Federation is gone. I think the way they brought the story down was quite effective. And obviously, to this day, it still is one of the most effective Star Trek episodes ever. It's always cited as being the best episode of the original series. So old Harlan did okay. When it comes to Star Trek V, my problem with Star Trek V is I think obviously I do like the interplay. My real problem with it is the execution and the tone. I think the tone of the movie is all over the place. I understand what William Shatner was trying to do. And what's really interesting is he wrote a treatment, I think it's called Act of Love, that I have somewhere. It's really pretty good. And I just think the execution, the tone is all over the place. I know the studio wanted more humor in it because of the success of Star Trek IV. But I think and you know, I blame a little bit, William Shatner had never directed a feature film, certainly on this scope before. So I do place the blame a little bit with Shatner. I mean, it was his first time out, and he was trying to make a very ambitious and very far-reaching film. But I think that it's just undercut at every level by the shifts in tone. And I think it's a beautiful looking movie. I love Goldsmith's score, and I do love the interplay between the whole idea of Cybok and expanding your consciousness and sharing your pain, and all of that I think is great. That's very Star Trekian, absolutely. And the Planet of Galactic Peace, I just think that it's done in such a rudimentary way that the stories, it's just undercut on many different levels, unfortunately. And I do enjoy the movie more than I used to. I just think it just seems, it's really sophomoric, whereas Star Trek The Motion Picture feels so big and grand, and it really, what I love about Star Trek The Motion Picture so much is you really get a sense of the awe and wonder and mystery of the cosmos. I mean, people talk about the fact that, oh, you know, it's a rehash of The Changeling or something, but I have never felt that way, because I think, again, what's so great about Star Trek The Motion Picture is, especially in the director's cut, when it really is hammered home, is Spock's transformation and understanding the value of emotion and what he didn't understand before. You know, he was so busy trying to be uber Vulcan that he wasn't open to the idea that it's not that humanity is a weakness. humanity provides a way of looking at the universe and a perspective when you're able to move away from logic, when you can think differently, where it's not just logic, you can see the universe in a different way. And a logical person, Spock being keenly logical, sees the value in that. Finally, he's like, look, I can still be a logical Vulcan, but I can still see the perspective of how emotions can broaden my perspective of the universe. I think that's great. That's why Star Trek the Motion Picture. I mean, I love everything about Star Trek the Motion Picture, but that in particular is what that movie is really about. And I think it's stunning. I mean, that kind of transformation would have been a great third season Michael Piller episode of Next Gen. You know, we always have to start with our characters, and I think that's amazing. I think it really is amazing. And as everyone knows, I'm a huge fan of Star Trek the Motion Picture, and I never will stop. So, well, I guess I didn't have to stop my stream. I guess Elizabeth has gone and stopped World War III here from happening, which is terrific. Anthony Gonzalez says, in Star Trek VI, why the hell did the Federation president ask the Romulan diplomat what he should do about Kirk and the Klingons? That was bizarre. Well, you know, I think that they were trying to show, when you have a sort of United Nations or you're consulting the major powers, you're trying to get all of your ducks in a row. And in a way, they were trying to show the Federation president, this president is not above the law. It's very, I thought it was inclusive, you know, plus I thought it was interesting. Ambassador Nanclus. Star Trek VI, I like it and I don't like it, but I really liked him. I liked Ambassador Nanclus. I want to see more of him, even though that guy was shady, man. That was one shady Romulan, but I did like him anyway. I think that was, again, the Federation president. He was just trying to do his job, trying to ask for, he wanted everyone's opinion, as Federation presidents are wont to do. That's what I think. Well, I guess that brings an end to this Robservations chat number 189. I want to thank everybody for being here, everybody for supporting the channel. I want to thank my moderators, Detective Jim, Greg Smith up in Olympia, Washington, Terry in the UK, and of course, the Honorable Mayor, Mr. Mike Bodden from Riverdale, Iowa. I want to thank you all for being here and moderating these chats. I want to thank everybody else for being here, all of you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, you imagination connoisseurs, and everyone that is here and makes this community what it is. I want to thank everyone for writing letters as well. And the website, love seeing people, more and more people are going to the website, to the Burnettwork.net, and you're commenting, you're adding things to the imagination gallery. It's great. We really are building a community that's sort of taking off, and hopefully, you know, we'll get like, it'll one day be like the 11,000 mile long space amoeba, or even fluidic space in Voyager. It's going to be, our community is going to get that big, hopefully. So if you like these chats, please hit like. The YouTube analytics need that. Subscribe, hit that little bell so you know when I'm going to go on. Again, if you have suggestions or letters, send them into the website. We love that. You can find me, by the way, if you don't, you can find me on Twitter. If you don't follow me, follow me. You can find me on Insta. First of all, I'm on Twitter at BurnettRM, or you can also follow the Burnettwork or Robservations on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram at RM Burnett, where I'm posting more pictures of Gilbert and Tallulah. Find me on Facebook. We do have the Post-Geek Singularity page on Facebook. I've been posting a lot of stuff there, so if you want to find me, that's probably the best way to find me, and all of that. But I want to thank all of you. And remember, these chats, I know what you thought I was going to say. These chats are brought to you by Get Lucky Tiger men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And go to their website at getluckytiger.com. And if you buy any of their stuff, you can check out and punch in PGS and get 20% off your order. PGS for Post-Geek Singularity. But you only have to punch in PG and S. So thanks for that, Lucky Tiger. We do appreciate your sponsorship. And finally, I will say, you know what I'm going to say? Every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I sign off, as I always do, with have a better day.